So why are we here? Quite simply, it's to promote the document that hopefully you can see at the end of the table, which is the Get It Right design guide. Why are we doing that? Well, as an initiative that seeks to eliminate avoidable error and reduce the circa 28 billion that's lost annually due to error, is probably the most powerful tool in our armory, certainly when it's used alongside the training that we provide. How do we intend to do that? I've assembled a panel of, well, I think you're friends, but you're also industry colleagues, expert guests, and they're going to help me today with their own personal experiences and reference back to the design guide. And hopefully there'll be something in there that resonates with you personally, or on the projects or within the teams that you're working on. I'll introduce them in just a minute, but in effect, we're going to do 4 rounds. So the first round will be about setting expectation. The second round will be about coordination and communication. The third will be about risk and prevention, and we'll finish with some lessons learned and practical advice. So who have I got with me today? Well, to my right, I have Lindsey Irons. Welcome, Lindsey. Lindsey has over 20 years experience in the industry, dealing primarily with technical design and delivery of major infrastructure projects and mixed-use schemes. She is currently leading on infrastructure and engineering to facilitate the development and delivery of high-quality, sustainable homes, workspace and academic buildings in and around Oxford. She works for a joint venture partnership between the Oxford University and Legal & General. Welcome, Lindsey. Tom, to my left and your right, is a project executive at Platform. Tom's a colleague of mine. We've worked together for the last 3 years. He has a wide range of experience in commercial, residential and mixed-use development. Since joining Platform, he's helped to deliver the building we're currently residing in, which is the Acre at Covent Garden, and we've also done some work in Paris together. Tom is a solicitor and has extensive experience negotiating contracts, development agreements and agreements for lease. Thank you, Tom, for joining us. Gavin, on my right, your left. Gavin brings invaluable experience to the design of office buildings and is currently the new director of Bennetts Associates. Sorry, guys, if you're able to stay on mute, that'd be great. He's currently responsible for a transformational master plan project in central London, consisting of 7 office buildings and new public realm. He was integral in the production of the design guide and has been a board member of the Get It Right initiative for several years. Welcome, Gavin. And finally, Harriet Hatton to my left. Harriet is a civil engineer and planner. Sorry, guys, if you could please mute yourself to avoid any disruption. I think that might be you, Amy. Her work is primarily focused on rail infrastructure, including the Trans-Pennine Route upgrade, which aims to improve rail capacity and sustainability in the UK. Harriet is frequently featured by the Institution of Civil Engineers and is a role model for aspiring engineers. So Harriet, you are very welcome. We'll get started, guys, and Gavin, I'm going to come to you first and ask you to tell us about the genesis of the design guide, being one of its co-authors, and over to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just explained the reasons why we did this, and it was formulated and launched around 2018, 2019. It's sector and project stage agnostic. I suppose that's quite important to note. It can be used by any discipline group or at the project stage. There are 12 topics. They essentially form best practice. It's not an innovative document. It's just regurgitating what we should be doing on a daily basis anyway. We've recently, or a year or so ago, updated the document. It was launched online, and most recently we've just launched an at-a-glance version of it, which in a way creates a salient points and defines those, summarises those for each discipline, whether it be clients or project managers or design consultants and contractors. And in a way, it advises those sort of key salient points under sort of generic stages of the project, being sort of the objectives and brief preparation, then design development, and also production of information and tender. So that hopefully It's a little bit more an easier guide to use on a day-to-day basis because there's a huge amount of information in the design guide, which no doubt will cut some of it down.
So just to repeat that then, you sought to distill the existing guide into a more usable, interactive format for the four sort of key user groups being client, project manager, consultant and contractor. And as if by design and by chance then, we happen to have one of each of those in the room today. So that's a good start for the Get It Right initiative. Lindsey, sorry, just before I launch into it then, this is round one, okay? So this is all about setting expectation. So the following set of questions will hopefully steer us down that route, and we'll look to reference the relevant parts of the guide for you, our audience. So Lindsey, I'll come to you first, if that's okay, please. Let's start with the brief, because it's so important and it's so often an area that goes wrong. So from a client perspective, what does getting it right in design actually mean to you?
Getting it right in design for me means a design that is actually deliverable in construction without any error would be the ultimate end goal.
And typically then your first appointment on a project might be an architect.
First appointment would be an architect, yeah.
And talk us through that process. I'm quite keen that this becomes a discussion amongst friends. So Gavin, you're approached by OUD one day. Yeah. They have a site. Where would you take it?
Well, I mean, obviously, that early relationship is really important, and some clients have gone through this process before, others haven't. Others are lay clients and need more support. But I think in a way, from an architect point of view, before you actually start defining what the project is about, what the functional requirements are of the project, you kind of need to get to know the organisation and does the individuals that you're talking to, do they actually know what they want is the big question. And what's most important probably is understanding the organisational structure, who are the key stakeholders, who needs to sign off this brief, as it were. And actually, also important that the brief develops over time. That needs to be frozen, prior to planning, one would hope. But it will evolve. As the design develops, it will challenge the brief and also open up opportunities as well. So I think there's a very strong relationship between an architect, the rest of the team, and obviously the client group as well. And no doubt will include the project manager as well.
And I also think, for a sort of built environment project, an architect would be the first person I'd get on board. But if it was purely a piece of infrastructure, it would be the relevant engineering disciplines to be getting involved.
I think that would argue it's the same process.
The process is the same regardless of of what sector or project. I think in the as we're talking about sort of developing that brief, that there is quite a lot of responsibility on the client, but equally the client needs to know what their competence and sort of limitations are with respect to that particular project, and actually get the input from the designers in that brief development at that early stage is something that I personally like to do in mine.
Do you find, do either of you find that you have more success with a more prescriptive brief, or actually is it better when you can allow a design team to sort of come together, collaborate, and come up with something and present that back to you? Is it easier to red pen something, Lindsey, or is it easier to ask a consultant to design exactly what you want?
I find it easier to red pen something. I've normally got a good idea of the vision and what we want as the end, what we ideally would like at the end. But for me, having that's why I pay a consultant team at the end of the day, is to bring that expertise into the project, and help, and then we can collaborate.
It's responding to that given situation, given our experience of clients. It is what their ambitions are, aspirations. I think it is important for clients to have a vision, write it down on page A4. What is the actual vision, and that vision can be shared with all the consultants, all the whole project teams. Everybody always remembers, refer back to, are we delivering the vision? So it's very important. But I think it's kind of could be an organic process, and we've worked on with clients who don't have much of an idea about even what they want, how they're going to take it forward. So I think again it comes down to the experience of the architect to understand, the level of input and support they will need, and thereafter it's a relationship, hopefully a strong relationship, and everybody after the briefing process is satisfied with where they're at. But that's why it's important that everybody who has an input, i.e. the users, for example, if it's a large organisation, many department heads, you need those department heads to be involved because it can't be dictated to, because it will cause friction, and that's something you don't really want. So I think it's key stakeholders are really important to the part.
Yeah, aligning people with a common objective, I think, is one of the things.
Which we'll come back to this, time and time again. But of course, key to all of that is communication. So
absolutely, we'll come on to that in round two. Tom, not always the case that a project manager would be appointed necessarily that early, but we're quite fortunate enough in our day-to-day role that sometimes we are asked to articulate that brief and mobilise the team. So, what are the types of things that the platform do, and that certainly the role of a good project manager is in ensuring all parties are aligned with that design intent and the requirements?
I think you need the project brief to be clear, can't be ambiguous. And I think, Gavin, what you said resonated, where you have a brief at the start, it's an initial brief, that will develop up to a point, and it will be an iterative process, certainly up to planning. And you need the buy-in of the design team and full understanding, not just of architects like yourself, but of the whole project team for the brief. And I think more broadly, we need to encourage a culture within the design team of open communication, trust, collaboration, and furnish them with the strength to speak up and challenge things as well. If they think that a design development's moved away from that initial brief and what it's trying to achieve, you want people not to just sit there and accept that latest development if something that's quite surprising. You want them to challenge it, and part of our job is certainly to instill that project culture at the very outset, to say you are empowered to speak up, to challenge. You're not going to be shut down. It's constructive input, then please speak up.
So much of it is about behavioural piece, then, isn't it? It's the cultural side of things. And Harriet, I promise I'll get you involved very soon. But just sticking with those early themes, though, and Lindsey, and how do you go about setting that culture? How do we create a space that a team can raise, I don't know, silly questions, for want of a better word, and are allowed to go and explore little things in the hope that they might uncover what might become an optimal design or something new, best product, best place?
For me, it's setting that culture as early as possible in sort of project inception phase. But you can't just, culture is not something that you just say you're going to do. You've got to actually live it as well. You can stick up a set of values on a PowerPoint in a design kickoff meeting, for example, and say this is how we're all going to behave. And the culture does involve, and yes, setting out those statements is great, but that's only the start of the process. It's been very clear with all design team members that they have a voice during the design process. For me, the best designs evolve where you've got different disciplines having some like competitive design tension during the process, where they're challenging each other's designs and coming up with different ideas. And as a client, I like to facilitate that, because the best ideas come from collaboration. And also, as a client, I don't like surprises. I don't want people to hide things from me. If there's a problem, I want people to know that they can raise that, and everyone's not just sort of squirreled away in what you're studying, your instructors and your MP and your architect, and everyone's going away doing their own thing. That just leads to huge errors and coordinated designs.
Or an opportunity, of course. I mean, quite often we find that design teams don't raise their hand when they think they've actually got something better, but if only the client had changed the brief ever so slightly. So for me, it's that double-edged sword almost. And sticking with the brief and maybe coming on to you, Harriet, I find it's a bit like Chinese whispers, and whether the client will pass something to the architect, who might then talk to a team, the project manager might have his own view. We eventually get to a contractor and a supply chain, and by that point the brief has evolved and perhaps is a little bit more firm, and we give you a recipe almost, don't we? So we're handing out contractors, this is what I want, please go away and build it. Quite often we overlook the fact that there's elements of the design that are incomplete or that we've had to pass on. So sticking with the theme of setting expectation, what are the common issues for you, and maybe evolve a little bit about what you do in the rail sector as well, because it's a bit different to the rest of us.
So, of course, all design issues can't be designed out, and that's why we have hazard transfer. So some issues can't be avoided. Like if you're excavating, there's always a risk of utilities and those services. So they're always important to be made clear at the start of the project. A lot of issues can come about because of a lack of interdisciplinary coordination when it comes to design. So that's why it's so important for people such as structures and then highways and utilities to come together and actually come up with a design in the room together. A lot of this can be, in my opinion, managed through modelling, so producing a model and then, like Lindsey said, actually like bouncing ideas off each other.
We're finding more and more actually that all of the contractors we talk to at a procurement level stage insist on, for want of a better word, and that's an area in the last probably decade that's really taken off, and it's matter of fact now for you guys. Yeah. The consultants, Gavin, I think have always used the likes of Revit and other tools to design three-dimensionally, or certainly in my working career, and yet we're still stuck in approving in 2D, it seems.
Yeah, I don't think it's been fully engaged by body. To use that in a very general way. I don't suspect they completely understand. I know they don't completely understand it and what the benefit it can bring. I believe probably more often than not they see it part of the basic service, which it kind of isn't, because to do it properly you need to kind of designate the individuals carrying out designated roles to make sure that the way the process is set up is certainly responds to what wants. So, and also, again, probably because in the building commercial world, probably the client's been told by the agent that you need to do it because we need to have an asset record at the end, and that comes with facilities management of the building. But again, not quite understanding what that really means.
Yeah.
So, we used it, but it's our choice to use it. We encourage our clients to make the most of it, but it's something which doesn't always happen. And probably a lot of projects we work on, the time the contractor gets on board, they pay somebody else to build a new model. This is something that they have their more control over.
They end up rushing upon it,
which is then it seems a bit crazy to be doing building a new model again.
Well, you introduce an interface and therefore a risk that things can go wrong.
Well, you might misinterpret the information. Going back to your point about interface management and given the topic we're talking about now, that's why scopes are really important.
Yeah.
So everybody knows what they're doing.
I think the Construction Design Management Guide is excellent at setting out scopes and responsibilities from all the way to designer to self-employed. And I think that regulation is really links up to GIRI, that it places responsibility and key roles on everyone.
We've naturally moved into the second round. So if I was a bout girl at the boxing, I would have held that up and let you all know that we were now in coordination and communication, which is great. I like the fact that that's happening organically. Tom, if I come to you perhaps about role clarity, because for me that's something that needs to happen early doors, and if we can get people to stay in their lane and do what they're good at, my experience is that lane leads to the best outcome. Can you elaborate a bit more on that for us and how that's achieved?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's various ways to do with the tools, but there's also project culture. So, I mean, encouraging communication. Well, just go back to Gavin's point, we do need clearly defined scope of services for each role. And that can take some time to develop, particularly at the early stages of the project. I think if you flip that on its head, you also need to know what other people aren't expecting to do, because that's where the gaps appear. You can't assume at the start of a project that you will give an architect a scope of service that they will be happy to do every single thing and produce every deliverable scope. You need to encourage an architect to speak up and voice, okay, we're not experienced in providing X. Someone else is going to have to pick this up. This detail will have to be produced at construction stage. That set of design is going to have to be produced by another specialist consultant. So it's important to tease out from your designers. Yes, you want to challenge them, but you also want to tease out what they simply can't provide on a project. I think that's important. You do that by scopes, in T's and C's. matrices as well, design responsibility matrices. So it might sound, I'm not talking different terminology, I'm talking about the same thing.
It's an org chart,
Basically,
as well, isn't it?
So level of design that each discipline is going to produce, who's going to take full responsibility for it, at what point in the day and other to pick it up. It's important.
How easy is that to do at the outset of a project, Gavin? We were talking next door about, we have this bizarre world where we're approached by a client sometimes who has a vision. I've bought a site, I'd like to build a new building. Great, what do you want? Don't know. And some of the best briefs we've ever received are just that, because we've got, you know, that freedom to go and explore and come up with something. Typically, it ends up becoming about maximising the development opportunity, and the thing begins to evolve and it gains traction. And very quickly, you can go from a blank canvas to something that can be refined. That happens with those early stages. So, the question I have for you about design responsibility matrices, which Tom's just talked about, and that roles and responsibilities piece, and ultimately you produce probably contractor's design portion, or if we're going to go D&B, you're going to give it all to a contractor. What's the right point to talk about that and define it and bring others in?
Right at the beginning. So at Bennetts Associates, we provide and produce our fee proposals at stage 0. You know, we will accompany that with a design responsibilities matrix, our template, which we will populate as a draft. Now, you know, if it's up to planning, it's a light version, so it's really mostly focused on what we believe the other consultants are doing, not doing. As you mentioned, what we're not, don't think we're doing. Something you definitely need to understand at that early stage. Equally, if, you know, as I mentioned again previously, we may be asked to provide fees up to stage 6 even. That's why then it's really important to define what we think we're doing at the later stages when the contractors on board. You know, assuming that it's probably D&B, renovated, you know, some of the CDP packages we probably would take on full responsibility for masonry, especially as the internal walls. Others like facades, then we wouldn't normally do that. So it's really important to have that defined, because that, you know, ultimately relates to our fee, relates to our resource and our own expectations. And importantly, when the contractor's coming on board tender stage, then if there is a misalignment of expectations, that's the right time to talk about it before, you know, appointments are, you know, agreed. Because once the appointments are defined, it's quite difficult then to change anything thereafter, because we have some really difficult conversations. And there's no reason why that needs to happen. It can be all up front. And if you're going to have difficult conversations, it's better to have it in a, you know, more friendly environment at the tender stage.
And Lindsey, we're sort of coming back the other way now. Coming back to you then, how do you balance the time pressures of all of this? And presumably you might have a business case at the outset and a budget even. How do you go about managing and balancing those risks? Because as much as we pass things down the chain, they do always come back, and ultimately they will reside with you and your lenders and the like. So what's your part to play in all of that?
Sort of going on from Gavin's point, I think you can sort of start to apportion that risk early.
Do you have a preconceived idea as to where you want things to sit, or are you open to receiving that back from the team? And
I always start with a sort of an early stage risk register on our projects right from the outset. Perhaps that's because I used to work for a contractor and in construction, so I've seen it from the other side. So bringing some of that experience into my sort of role now, I think it's always dependent on the type of project, which normally then depends on the type of funder that we've got as well, and what their risk profile is like, existing site conditions, and what's reasonable. And then I start to, you know, work out who's responsible for what, and also that might change and evolve throughout the process. You know, in terms of, it does come down to reasonableness at the end of the day and what is appropriate. For example, when I was working on an ageing treatment works in a previous role, we were constructing new assets that needed to connect to existing assets. There was no way that it was fair and reasonable for us to place the risk of the operation of the existing assets on the contractor who's building the new assets. That was entirely our responsibility. Sometimes it's quite clear cut, and other times it can be a bit grayer.
We've we've begun to stray into risk and prevention, which is fine. But just to close out round two, Harriet, I'm going to finish with you. Clarifications, an evolution of design responsibility, contractor's design portion. I find that as we move through the design process, more and more design might have little annotations, little notes in size 6 font buried away. They're there for all to see, but sometimes you have to look for them. That's not a blight on my consultant colleagues. It's an attempt at effective communication, because there are typically masses and thousands of drawings at the point that we bring a contractor on board. But what is the impact, Harriet, that you found for unclear or incomplete information?
So personally, I've always been taught whenever you get a set of drawings, you go through them and you make sure what you don't understand, you can speak to your team and collaboratively go. But if there's many issues, it'll result in a lot of time, because GIRI teaches if we don't understand something to press pause. So if you're pausing at the start of a project and you're having to raise requests for information or technical queries about drawings, you're going to lose time, which will then impact costs, and it will delay program, which could then impact the program much later down the line. However, it's always so important to look at them initially instead of running out to site and breaking ground, because it's almost can be too late then. But that's why I believe these issues can be avoided if you do collaborative design through coordination and, like Lindsey said, like clarity of the drawing. So not cluttered drawings. I always think phasing drawings are really excellent for helping understand buildability, and lack of low revision numbers. You could say you get to the 5th revision of a drawing, they will be completely different from the first, and that's when issues can come in as well.
Okay, so sticking with the theme of risk and prevention now then, so we've slipped into round 3, which is fine, and we'll come back to you, Harriet, with how can contractors best contribute then during that design process, because it might be slightly different in your line of work to ours, but very much I find I don't think there would be any real great advantage before stage 3 necessarily, but happy to be corrected, and perhaps our audience might have more of a view on that. Certainly during our IBA stage 3 and the spatial coordination piece, I'm seeing more and more there could be an advantage to bringing in the likes of MEP, drylining, to agree complete systems, fire stopping, builders work, all that kind of good stuff. I can see there's an opportunity there, but what's your end view on it, Harriet, and in your line of work as well?
I think early contractor involvement is fantastic, especially when it comes to the feasibility drawings, because you can identify temporary works and they can actually be built into permanent works sometimes. I think definitely around Reba stage 3, or what I call grip floor and Pike and railway, it can be excellent because no one knows everything, and sometimes it takes a specialist contractor to go, we've done it like this before, we've done it another way, and then further down the line it'll result from excellent drawings which don't have any contradicting details, or it'll be simple and exact.
Thank you, Tom. That role of risk management then, and as the project manager, that we end up having oversight, I think, over the many different camps and the many different hats, and attempt to articulate it in different ways for our clients sometimes. How do you ensure that risks are identified during design, and how are they managed, how are they owned, and how are they closed?
You can't assume that risks identified are going to go away, and you can't go about it in a constructive way. So you mentioned risk registers. I think that's a tool. So it's a consolidated list of not only of what have you found, but what's the impact? Who's going to own that? You can't. It's no good identifying the risks if someone's not taking ownership for resolving it, actually coming up with the action to close that. So I also think you can't. Risk registers will take one form at the start of the project, but continuous process, things will be closed out, things will be discovered throughout the project the whole way along. And actually taking leaf from your book, you've got quite a disarming way of teasing out risks during the course of a project, but just asking people, just keeping up with time. Because it's a disarming way of getting people to actually vocalise what's on mind, share problem halved, and it's effective. So it's a way of actually keeping the process live and relevant, but it's nothing without ownership and resolution. The resolution might be surveyed, might be specifying a particular product to close up a performance criteria. But I think it needs to be structured, it needs to be live, it needs to be used, and the ownership needs to be very clear.
I think one thing we don't do enough in those early stages is talk about the potential effect of some of these issues and these assumptions. So, that they are carried and to the point where they become realised, arguably at the worst point during construction, which is when obviously got cost overheads and other commitments have been made elsewhere. Gavin, perhaps, what is the impact of insufficient design time? Is there a direct correlation between the amount of time you get to do a complete design that's truly coordinated and correct and complete, and the number of assumptions? And Lindsey, ultimately, that will come back to you in just a moment as to, so what do we do about that then? So I'll start with you first.
These risks, clearly, the amount of information that you need to produce, whether it be drawings or schedules, specifications. To do that, there's a process with regards to designing, coordinating, consultation process is really important, whether that be within stakeholders of the project, or statutory or non-statutory. So there's a whole process to go through. And now, if the time is limited, then some of that can't all happen. So clearly that might mean that the information isn't well considered, it's incomplete, there are errors within that information because the it's been prepared so quickly. It also probably leads to corners being cut. People will rely on their experience, to make decisions rather than actually really assessing the site, the constraints, what the impacts,
what's actually in front of them.
Yeah, you're just like, that's noise I can't deal with because I don't have time. Therefore, I'm just going to take my value judgment. That's what I did before. So it's a big implication. And so going back on just talking about if these issues do arise, I think it's hard, but I think sometimes you need a pause. You just have to accept that don't pause, then there will be an outcome which is not favourable to the project.
Well, just linking it back also to the former couple around here. If that's communicated effectively, and you've truly understood what's been said there, and look, you have a need, you need a stage 2 done in X number of weeks, well, we can do that, but it comes with a series of caveats and assumptions and exclusions and potential risks and issues, but we can do what you ask. That's these are all within our gifts, but the quality of the output will be directly proportional to the amount of time and energy that goes into it. So okay. How then, Lindsey, on a project like a brownfield site, greenfield site, we have a vision, we know what we want. How are we going to go about setting those timings to make it work for you and allow enough time for a team that's not even necessarily assembled yet to come up with a program that is robust, that can be managed, that leads to a complete piece of information to our contractor? I'm going to give that one back to you.
Thank you. Coming up with a program at the start of a project is normally based on what your previous experience or collective experience in the client organisation or consultants that you work with closely to come up with a rough programme.
For my benefit then, is that to help with financial modelling and viability, or what's the point?
It's everything. Sometimes, it depends if we've got particular timescales from a funding perspective, or if it's just set out how long this is going to take. And then we need to put all of that into a development appraisal from start of stage 0 all the way through to handover and completion. So having a robust programme as early as possible is something that we always like to do at AED. Do we allow enough at the early part of the programme? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, and that often depends on what the pressure is on the asset that we're delivering. If we've got to replace an end of life asset, then there's probably more programme pressure. But if it's something like a greenfield site that we've probably got more control over, then that's also slightly different. I also do like to get input from. We tend to work with the same consultants on our projects, unless something goes wrong, and we will get advice from them. We'll say, look, I'm thinking about, is 12 months going to be, or 6 months going to be enough for us to submit for outline planning, or actually do we need a bit more? Oh, and then the consultant will say, oh, come on, let's go and have a look at the site together, and we'll come up with something collaboratively. So it's a mixture of all. There's not one I can't sit here and say this is how you need to do it every time, because it is very site
I
specific.
think asking consultants to input is really important.
Yeah.
Because versus sometimes we see programs which are really long. It's like, why are we doing 12 months stage 3?
Yeah.
It's, you know, I'd rather best if we have more time in stage 4 when it's information. That's you really want the period to have some robust information that we can share around civil. So it's important to share and debate. And but a program is really important, fundamental. Design program. From the outset, the guide. One of the most important sections of the guide is the robust approach, and that will say about the importance of a program with milestones which are achievable, realistic. That there's time to do what we need to do, and also accept that sometimes things have to perhaps go back, maybe, just for the betterment of the project to get to the right answer.
I quite like the GIRI phrase, we've always got time to put it right, but never time to get it right. And I wonder how much time any of us are allowing in any of our projects for that refinement piece, and probably best spent at the beginning, right, at any stage. Have I got everything I need? Is it complete? Is it correct? Is it coordinated? Have I got the right resource, time, materials to do it? And actually things would go so much better, wouldn't they?
And I think factoring into that program as well around, review and decision making, because you can say, oh, it's going to take me X amount of time to produce these drawings, but how long is it going to take to produce a coordinated design that we've got proper time to review and sign off before we then move to the next stage. And I think that is something that we perhaps don't always get right.
And do move to the next stage. Listen down what still needs, what the outstanding are, whatever it might be. What do we need to resolve next stage? What are we handing over? And also that same with the contractor. Just what isn't resolved? What specialist input do we need to develop certain package?
That's when the interdisciplinary design reviews and checks become so critical, because until you get other people engaging, you don't know what needs to be tweaked, and that's why the milestones become really critical. Because I work in Alliance, so if design's like civils is like, but we need to all work together, and that's why the charter and the collaboration becomes so important.
I think we're quite good as an industry at articulating what we want, why we want it. We always defer how we're going to do it until the last possible moment, which can actually have an impact on what and those sort of minor tweaks that arise out of the contracted design portion piece, perhaps. And God forbid it has an impact on why we're doing the thing. But let's move on to round 4, just conscious of time. So lessons learned, practical advice. Tom, perhaps I'll come back for you and talk about behaviours then, because I think a lot about what we've talked today is about behaviours. It is about culture. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. There's certainly a way that we're promoting and that we think will help organisations, teams and individuals get it right. But what sort of behaviours have you seen from us that help prevent design errors?
I think going back to something we've already covered, which is instilling project culture at the outset that encourages collaboration and openness and challenge, because we think a culture is this soft skill that actually just has a limited impact on do, but actually it has tangible effects. If you instill an open culture, you can tease out issues earlier. It does a great graph. We can see time goes on, your impact to influence across decision starts very high and then falls off a cliff at construction, and it pushes the importance of actually teasing out issues earlier. It's showing that resolutions prompt because designers are actually comfortable talking to one another and challenging things and raising things to their client. On a project we're currently doing at the moment, it sounds a bit hokey, but we installed this concept, Zen Buddhist concept, Shoshin. So come at things with an open mind and no preconceived ideas. On design team meetings, with little place sittings with characters explaining what it is, and that's reinforced each of the design workshops to say this was the intent to start the project, but it's how we really will operate this way. This is how we can manage the project. And we expect everyone to come each and every week with that training plan. It's not just us.
I'd be interested to learn from the audience how many of you, if you're in a consultancy role, have ever started with a blank sheet before, and actually how many times are you turning up with a preordained view of what it is we're doing and the process that will be going on and what the deliverables should be, because it's so unique and it's so contextual. Harriet, prevention then, what one change would most reduce avoidable error in your opinion?
I would say an adoption of 4D study planning model would be excellent. It also really helps with
Go on, expand for the plebs in the room, such as myself. What is 4D and 5D?
So 3D is a 3D model of a 2D drawing. 4D is with timescales, and 5D is cost as well. And the idea is that we get to a model where we can actually tag our closeout to it. So say quality documents we can tie to a model. So that model in turn becomes what we hand back to the client. It helps with the life cycle of project and maintenance. I'd also say early contractor involvement is excellent. As a contractor, we do a lot of collaborative planning meetings. And we also do T- meetings where we go, what could we have missed? And this is more for like big blocks of work where we do really heavy civils, but that could be adopted to design where people come in and go, what have we missed?
Well, so the initiative actually adopts and talks about carrying out a pre-mortem. So it begin with the end in mind, and then what are all the things that can go wrong? And then actually let's just put a process in place to avoid it.
We call it a readiness review, which is probably a more positive name for it. And in that,
it's in readiness for next project.
yeah. So you say, what do we need? What have we encountered in the past? But
Do you as a standard, as a company and organisation, do you do lessons learned at the end of projects then?
we do. So with rail, we've been doing a lot of stations. So we did a massive stations lesson learned based on Morley, and then the Huddersfield team who are currently building Huddersfield train station. It is presented to them, and then you learn from it, and then in turn each project should get better based on the last.
I'm not going to pretend that I think every station's the same, but that there is repetition clearly in that line
Key
of work.
principles. You'll always have a platform. You'll always have a track. You'll always have.
So there's refinement.
And the quality should be the same where you're reviewing the drawings, producing an inspection test plan, collating the documents. Because at the end, a station will always need to down the park.
Sure. And so Gavin, just thinking about it from a consultant point of view then, and lessons learned, and how do you apply the lessons of what is a very individual, unique project to the next one?
So,
or is it the same case? It's always going to have a structure, it's always going to have MEP, it's always going to have certain components.
what's fundamental is that you have a lessons learned review. I'm not sure that given
Yes.
projects, and it should be led by ultimately the client, really, and everybody, key project team members sat around really talking about the project, always open in a kind of open way, because you want to have a good relationship and you want to work together again. But what are the lessons coming of that, and then obviously recording those lessons. And at Bennetts, we have what's called a project support group. So there's a sort of technical design management, design, BIM, key leads, and they will input into all projects, certainly at the beginning. But at the start of each project, we endeavour to have kick-off sessions, which in a way that group will reflect on lessons learned of previous projects and raise particular watch points. It can only be watch points at that stage, as in, well, this was what happened on that project. Maybe we need to be a bit aware of that, or we do need to fit the process, or and if it's fun, I suppose something's fundamentally gone wrong, so it affects our QS policy management system, then that needs to be adopted and clearly dealt with across all projects. But I think it's just reinvesting that learning into the next project. It doesn't always happen.
I'd be very interested to learn in a moment how much of today is new news to our audience. I wouldn't think that there's an awful lot, because I think we all face the same problems always. I don't think we're unique in that regard, but certainly the document is attempting to refine that process and make it better for us all. We'll move to questions. I got one more for the panel.
Lessons learned aren't always negative though, and I think we've said it's about what sometimes it's about going, this went really well. Let's adopt this. Collaboration can be a really good lesson learned where we got this and we did this. So
You need to understand why it went well.
Yeah.
It's not always that obvious, actually.
No, so
Sometimes you get on, it's collaborative, you work well together, and obviously, costs that come in is on time.
And it ought to become the new baseline, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
So if we adopt that, and this is where we are now, well, the next time we find somebody goes better, and we should never really drop back below that point.
Absolutely. I think it's important to say lessons learned aren't always negative.
Agreed. Panelists, before we move to our audience, I have one final question for you all. You get 10 seconds to come up with 10 words or less. What is the one thing everyone should do differently starting tomorrow? I've got 4. I've got one with 4. If you can beat 4, I'll go first just to give you a chance to think. I think we should think slow and act fast. There's plenty of time early doors to get things right. Let's take that time and let's be certain of our outcome. So think slow, act fast is my 4 words. Should we do ladies first? Lindsey?
Press pause to avoid error.
Oh, nice. Where did you get that one from? So that's 5. So I'm in the lead. Lindsey's 5. Harriet, what have you got?
Collaborative, like positive outcomes.
Blimey, you should have stayed with act collaboratively. You would have been at 2 and winning.
Yeah, but
I'm still in the lead with 4. Tom, you're up next.
Sometimes being too concise is almost negative.
Okay.
Because it comes from the details themselves.
Okay, I like that. Detail matters.
Yeah.
There you go. Good words. You're still winning.
Detail
Tom, can you beat detail
I
matters?
can't. I've got 4, which is talk to one another. So I think within the design team, especially, we've seen on projects where we have multidisciplinary consultants and think everything's in house. Of course, going to talk to each other about what we might change this. Does not happen. In fact, I think there can be at least as many siloed environments with a multi-disc as there can be with a team. And in either case, either structure.
I'll never assume it makes an ass out of you and me. Gavin, you're last.
Kind of similar in a way. I think it's 3 main 4. So communicate, check, and play back.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you for that. Hopefully it wasn't too painful. I am not going to attempt to try and conclude what we've just discussed because conscious of time, and I'd rather spend the next 10 minutes hearing from our audience. So, Susan, you're up. If you'd like to fire a couple out, we'll work out between us who's best placed to answer them.
Great, thank you. So we've got a question from David Myers about what quality metrics you would recommend to control quality during the concept and design stages of a project.
Is that an obvious one, Gavin? If it was a question on value, I find that infinitely easier to answer. But quality itself, quality metrics, it's tricky, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do. Quality can be subjective. And that's perhaps what's good quality for one person is not for another. If you're talking about the aesthetic of something, I suppose measuring the process and have you met the program? Have you avoided errors along the way? Is something coordinated? I suppose if there's open transparent then and you're unaware of things going wrong, then that's a metric in a way to show that things are going well.
Probably.
I don't think there's a system or process or piece of software we could perhaps use to oversee that.
I suspect it very much comes back to the brief and that communication piece about what are the things that are important to you. David, I think was your name, but had you rephrase that question ever so slightly and ask about value? That for me, I consider value as a Rubik's cube, and one side of that is the quality piece, which in our line of work, Gavin and I and others, for me, the value is driven by how quickly can I return it to market? What does it look like? How quickly can I return it and get it income producing? Actually, because you got to let these things. How much can I charge rent? I guess what is its value, which is typically an area versus quality play. How much does it cost to build it? What are the risks that I'm prepared to take on and challenge and face? And typically there are 4. Can I get the money to build it? Can I get planning to build it? Can I build the thing? And then what are the leasing risks? I think they're the big 4 that we typically face.
I suppose, the early design stage, one of the key metrics is planning consent. So if you've achieved a consent and that's not easy anymore, quite vitally, then that in a way I suppose shows that you've met a good level of quality in what you're doing. And that doesn't, there could still be fundamental problems with the design of the building, which won't come to light until it's constructed. But it's one way of
you can demonstrate you tick certain criteria, can't you? So.
We monitor it as a contractor. We do have metrics to monitor it. So, some are like error closeout, ITPs, production. Obviously, they all come much later than the design.
Well, but that's a physically built thing, isn't it, as opposed to a conceptual idea? Because for me, the concept phase is still about, can I go down here and what am I going to find? Oh, I like that. I'll keep going. I don't like that anymore. Come back. Okay, now I'll go down there. I like that. I don't like that. Come back. And it's that sort of playing hide and seek in the dark kind of thing to find the thing that we're after. But we'll sleep on that, David. We'll maybe have a think about it, see if anything else comes to mind. But
thank you. So sort of observation / question from Elaine about how often we reflect on what went well. I think this is picking up on Harriet's point, reflecting on success. What are our factors for success, and not just lessons learned when things go wrong?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So we were a term where the railway shut for like 30 days. It's called a blockade in our language. So we've just done a massive package of work, and what we did prior to it was we did a readiness review. And we identified things what went well last time and things what might have gone better. And by the end, we had about 100-slide presentation for all these projects along the route going, this led to good outcomes. I think, and like health and safety can be monitored in lessons learned, and like people's like general happiness at the site. So I think lessons learned all can link back to culture as well. But no, I do think it's important to speak about the positives as well.
And we're best placed, I think, to help define success during that project. I think that probably comes from our role, and certainly the client taking a bit of an open view. And I think success is wrongly pinned on, did I get exactly what I wanted when they said they'd give it me for the exact money they said it would cost? Well, I've never worked on a project that looked like that, and I'd be interested to know if anyone else has. Success is, did I ultimately get the best thing that I could have there in the quickest time possible for the right amount of money? I think I've said the same thing, just slightly differently, but it's that sort of ever so slightly different change in view, and what matters to a contractor in terms of success and output is slightly different probably to a PM, to an architect, to a client. Don't know.
I think if you come to the end of the project to answer the question and you still want to work with the majority of people in the room, that's a pretty good measure of success.
Wouldn't that be a wonderful metric instead of cost, time and quality? Do I trust the people? Do I like the people? Could I work with the people again?
Construction can be a really tough industry at times, and that's why it links back to culture, because you can be on a project that's not doing very well, but you can come in every day and be happy. I think that is a true testament to the scheme itself, isn't it?
And I think when things do go wrong, there's an opportunity there that presents itself to build trust, to raise a hand early, to come forward with options and opportunities to overcome it, because things will go wrong. That's a matter of fact, isn't it? But
yeah, and I've worked with some fantastic engineers who've come across something and gone, right, we're going to take a step back, let's figure out a solution. And sometimes that is a
you have to give me their numbers before you leave. Anything else on that one for Elaine?
No, I mean, just again, we talked about this earlier, that in those successful times where we've had good projects, very, very rarely does that team then move on to the next project. Yeah.
I don't want to chance fake, Gavin. In your career today, of all the projects you've done, percentage-wise, how many have been successful? If you say 100%, I'm going to make you leave the room.
Fairly successful.
More than half?
Yeah.
And would it be fair to say that you've adopted the principles of the guide in those?
I mean, I think in a way, we contributed to the guide, obviously, so I think we were on board with it anyway. So
it's based on years of experience.
It wasn't a huge amount of learning, finding to some degree of what that, the guide actually, shows us the way as well.
For me, it's become a point of reference. I can rely upon it to reinforce what I think I know. And time moves on, things change, projects change, people change. But actually, as a point of reference to come back and go, yeah, this is a good way to do this, and this is why.
But through doing it though, you are very aware of the potential red flags on projects, and I think it's something that we're learning as a business to do, to be able to respond to that as soon as we can by having very open conversations about we think this is going to happen. Whether it be delays to the design process or delays to a construction program and what the impact be on the consultant if the PC goes back, etc. How are we going to mitigate that? You know, and I think in a way, so it does inform your judgments and how you operate. And again, it's obvious stuff, but it does allow you to to manage a project better, better way.
Hopefully, Elaine, we've done enough there to answer your question. Susan?
So we've probably got time for one last question. So David Wood has asked, how is change accommodated successfully in the approach set out in the design guide?
You know, and again, this is difficult and challenging, but at time, change usually has to be adopted quickly. So there isn't enough time to update information. There's not enough time to fully consider the impact. There's not enough time to coordinate or can consult. So, you know, late changes, you know, they have a ripple effect. You know, they will, you know, present to interface management as well. And you know, just, you know, significant changes, again, if you can just stop and pause, everybody collectively debate what the impact would be, and then have sufficient time to update information, then in theory, change can happen. Yeah, change is good sometimes, if it was the betterment of the project, but there's the risk that there isn't enough time to do it.
I think it's important to remember too, just because there's an interface doesn't mean it's like a line in the sand. You can go across that and go, what can we do to mitigate? For example, like on my project, we can go to other contractors and go, we need more time. Can we work this out together? Like, what do you need for us to have complete for you guys to come in and do your work? So I think that's a really good point as well.
I think when you implement the change, has a direct impact on the effect that it might have. So I quite prefer sort of bottling all of the changes, but discussing them when they first arise so you can give rough advice, and then saving them up for the end of the design stage. Once you've got something that's coordinated and settled, then implementing it. But even if it means an addendum to that design phase to say, we were here, you asked for this, we are now here. Do you still agree with the quality, time and cost? And then we'll move forward. Of course, you can move forward without that. And there are times when you have to, right? But again, it's coming back to that communication piece, which is, have you understood the risk if we proceed not knowing and not fully integrating something at this point?
And also clearly, to share early stages, you probably wouldn't resolve the actual phase design.
Yes.
So if you're introducing a new element, component, change to that, then you know that may affect the original. Well, the original design might not have been fit for purpose anyway, for whatever reason. So, you know, it could have a quite a big impact actually on other aspects of the building, which actually sense.
I think we'll finish with a simple thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank you for listening. We'll undertake to come back on any of the outstanding questions, but really appreciate your time. Hopefully it's been informative. I've certainly enjoyed talking to the panel. So Lindsey, Gavin, Tom, Harriet, thank you very much for coming down today. That's all from us.